Hey guys, it's Clovis, and for today's custom duel series, I have a pretty special custom duel. This is an idea I had, and I had tinkered around with a little bit. By the end of it, it still wasn't quite perfect. There were a few issues, and I could have rearranged the deck at the end, but I did get some decent duels out of it, so I figured, why not? I mean, decent as far as the AI goes. You can't really get a perfect duel out of the AI unless you duel them like 50,000 times, but I had an idea, I stuck with it. I had difficulties along the way, the map wasn't cooperating with the way that I wanted it to, but eventually I got some pretty cool duels out of it. Part of the reason I did that was the deck I used to duel against this was pretty weak. There was no terrain change abilities in it or anything. And I just think that makes it a lot more challenging. But basically the idea I went for was a sort of catacomb themed deck. So I wanted like tight spaces, like almost like corridor, or like, think about catacombs that we constructed. So the deck leader I picked was Skull Servant. First of all, not only does he look badass, I do like the idea of the deck leader looking like, or resembling, an almost humanoid figure, like it looks like it'll play cards. I just think those deck leaders look cool. Not only that, but he has cool leader abilities. The low level zombies get direct damage halved, so if you try and go directly for his deck leader, you deal half the damage. So it makes it a lot harder to pressure this sort of opponent. The original plan I had was for him to be on crush terrain, like all the middle of the field being crush terrain, so you'd be forced to attack him with cards, like if you wanted to go through the middle, kind of like the strategy you'd use to beat the Skull Knight, Menowid and Fabuleur, that's the AI this deck uses, by the way. Probably should have said that earlier. Not only is that a good strategy to beat him, but if you do that, you have to use monsters less than 1500 unless you change the terrain. So I had the idea of setting it up on a field that's all crush in the middle, and then having this direct damage half, so you'd be forced to attack him with stuff that's like 1400 attack or lower, and then that would halve your damage. This would halve the damage of that attack, so even further, so he would only be taking hits of like 725 or lower, realistically. So to fit the theme of, zombies and stuff, I just kept to some strong zombie cards. Snake Hair permanently stuns the opponent when these are destroyed, so if you want to get past the Snake Hair, you have to sacrifice a pretty powerful monster and then that gets permanently stunned. So you're forced to Curse Break it to unstun it, which removes all of its power-ups. Fiend's Hand straight up destroys the enemy monster that destroys this, so you're not getting it back unless you revive it with Monster Reborn, and if you do that, the power-ups are gone. Shadow Ghoul can go onto the Labyrinth. What I would like to have done by the end of this duel, if I optimized it completely, was added some zombie effect cards, Graveyard, the Hand of Invitation, and or Blue-Eyed Silver Zombie. So when they were flipped up, it turned any Shadow Ghoul, or Wall Shadows, back to zombies. Because after you put this on Labyrinth, it turns to Wall Shadow, which is a warrior, so it's no longer boosted by the terrain. But I didn't really end up fixing this deck completely, because I kind of did want to show some of the flaws of it and what actually happened. But yeah, the whole point of me adding that was so he has the advantage through all the Labyrinth field. 3 Dragon Zombie. This is just a way for it to bring out damage early without a real penalty. Because it's 3 stars, every turn, you generate 3 stars. If he draws Dragon Zombie, he can play it immediately. And if he draws it with any other zombie he can also play, it turns into Skelgon, which is... it cycles through his deck faster, and he can end up playing in defense mode, which is a bit more than Dragon Zombie. Like, the attack of Skelgon is 100 more than Dragon Zombie, but the defense of Skelgon is 200 higher than that, so he can theoretically play that defense mode, and it may or may not make a difference, but it's just cool. I don't know, Skelgon's aesthetic. I like Skelgon, which is why I added 3 Skelgon. I don't know, I just think Skelgon's cool. This isn't really an efficient 6-star monster, but I wanted this deck to have some higher summoning level stuff to force it to stagger its monsters with its spells and traps. Which is why I added 3 of those in, and 3 Great Mammoth. These are obviously, this is the most powerful zombie card you can play in the game. So if he plays a spell or a trap on his first turn, then his second turn, if he draws this, he can play it. Suddenly, it's 2700 on Wasteland, and with the leader ability, it's an extra 100 attack and defense. So without any equips, he plays this on the second turn, 2800 attack. It's pretty good. So because we're using Skull Knight AI, what I did is add a bunch of cards that the Skull Knight AI would use. But unfortunately, he never played any of these. I don't know why. I have no explanation as to why he didn't play these cards. Because normally his AI plays Tremendous Fire whenever he draws it. He just plays it and activates it straight away. Normally he activates just desserts if you have 3 or more cards on the field, but he never did. He would just play these face down. I ran over him a couple times. Last Day of Witch, he actually flipped up and killed one of my spellcasters once, which his AI, I think, is programmed to actually do that specifically. But I added Exile the Wicked because originally I was going to put Yami on the field. I don't know why I ended up putting Wasteland, I just thought it looked cooler, but I forgot to change this. And then on two occasions, he just randomly flipped up Exile of the Wicked. So I have no idea. He kind of treated this card as if it was supposed to be Tremendous Fire, and then treated Tremendous Fire as if it was supposed to be something different. I'm not entirely sure why that is. We haven't really looked into the AI enough to really figure this stuff out. But that puzzled me. He flipped up Exile the Wicked when I didn't have any Fiends, and it just did nothing, but without hesitation, he just flipped it up, so that was weird. The power-ups don't really make a difference in terms of what AI plays them. All the AIs will use power-ups, with the exception of Rex and Weevil AI. If you have less than 3 wins, they don't play power-ups. But in any other scenario, all AI will just automatically put power-ups on anything that's compatible with it. So, because every single card in this deck is a Dark Zombie, as soon as he draws a monster with any of these equips, he'll just automatically put the equips on it. This fills up deck space, increases the damage potential, so why not? Got 3 Dark Energy, 3 Violet Crystal. The trap, so I had 2 Spellbinding Circle, I had 3 Eco Boons. The reason why I had Eco Boons is because I wanted all the middle of the field to be Crush originally, and I just never bothered taking these out. In hindsight, I would have liked to. Call the Grave and 2 Magic Jammer. So, interesting thing about this AI is he will, from what I understand, he's programmed to put his full range traps on Crush tiles. So normally when you duel the Skull Knight, Manowar, and Fabler, he moves forward like he normally does. He always does that. He does in this duel as well. And then he'll play a spell or trap like in front of him, whatever, on the Crush tiles. In this case, you'll see the map in a minute, he actually ends up putting some trap cards and potentially spell cards behind him. I haven't double checked this. I'm going to have to optimize this all, as I said. So I'm pretty sure he played the Magic Jammer and the Call of the Grave like behind him. And then eventually, after he had like some slots full and he had some monsters out on the field, he did start playing these spell cards in front of him. You'll see later on, I do trigger an Eco Boon and Spellbinding Circle. I'm pretty sure all AI... The good thing about trap cards is like all AIs can play them. If they draw a hand with like, for example, 4 monsters that they can't actually play because they don't have the summoning power for it, and then 1 trap card, they'll just automatically play the face card trap down. And the cool thing about trap cards is you don't need to really do anything special with them. They're just a trap card. They just sit there until they're activated. So all AIs can benefit from a trap card because when the circumstance arises that they play a trap card, they'll just put it face down like you're supposed to do normally with a trap card. All AI will do that. And then eventually you'll hit it, and you'll be sorry, potentially, if you hit a trap card. So yeah, Call the Grave I thought was a cool idea because it's like kind of zombie themed. But yeah, all in all, I do kind of now, looking back, wish that I fixed this stuff up, but I literally added these cards in because Skull Knight AI is supposed to use these cards, but for whatever reason he didn't. Some other maps that I've tried, when I've tested, he does use these, so I don't know. I need to find out a lot more about this AI before I know for sure what happens. It could even be something to do with what's in your deck. Like, I really have no idea. Um, but the save file I played against this had beaten both sides, so the AI should have functioned the same way as when you fight him after beating the entire game. So I really have no idea why it didn't play any of these burn cards that normally is programmed to play. And I guess it didn't play Dying Keto because it never drew it. I don't fully understand. But yeah, overall, pretty happy with the duel, so I didn't bother going in to edit the deck. I thought it would make more sense to actually explain why I have some cards in the deck like Exile of the Wicked when they don't really make sense when he uses them in the duel. But that's it for the deck. So this is the field I ended up using. You notice it's completely different to the field that he normally duels in. So what Skull Knight's AI always does, this, he moves forward one tile and then he just kind of sits here. This is his spot, he always wants to come back to it. If you push him away from it, he will want to go back to that spot. Once he's here, he will start playing monsters around him wherever he can, actually. He's not programmed specifically to play them behind him. So if you free up these crush tiles, or this area that's normally Labyrinth or Crush in his field, he will just play monsters here. And I didn't even realize this until I started playing against this in this map. He actually plays his full range traps and some other traps potentially on the crush tiles. Potentially some spells on the crush tiles too. So his AI would be specifically programmed to play those cards on the crush that it happens to be in the middle of the field normally. But because I had the crush behind him, he plays some cards here. So I think there's a lot you can do with that. I could have given in some other full range traps for him to do that, would have been cool. Something like Bad Reaction to Samochi, depending on, what the player has. But yeah, ultimately he moved here and he played monsters to his left and to his right, and because of the way the labyrinth set up, it was actually pretty difficult to get past. You have to go through one of these corridors in the middle or go around the side, and by the time you get around there, he would have played cards to his left and his right, and he would also have played some trap cards here and there. Maybe even, eventually he played his short range traps actually in front of him, funnily enough. Like the Spellbinding Circle and the Ikaboon he would play here and here. And overall, I was actually really happy with how this AI performed on this map. I only used a map like this on a whim. I thought, what can I do that looks creative, like a Catacomb sort of setup? I kind of do wish I ended up using Dark Terrain, but the Wasteland, I just thought, for a Catacomb setup, it may or may not be fitting, but they're both fitting, and they're both power-up zombies. But if I did the Yami, then it would have made more sense to put Exile of the Wicked in the deck like I did, because if you benefit from the Yami field because you're using Fiends, then he destroys your Fiends if he does that. But ultimately, I was really happy with how the AI performed on this map. The reason why I did this was because he wasn't functioning properly on the normal map. So I'll explain that. So this is just a recreation of the Stonehenge map that he normally plays on, when you verse the Skull Knight final boss. This is exactly what the map looks like. But what happened when I would try to duel this guy is he would move forward like normal, but then after that, he would play a monster behind him, directly behind him. Not behind and to the left, but just directly behind him. No matter what monster it was, whether he refused to make Skelgon, he put an equip on it, or he didn't, and he just left it there. Immediately following that, he would play a monster on one side of it, and he would just leave it there, just in attack mode. He just double tapped it in attack, and then after that he would play a monster here. So he would just have 3 monsters here in attack mode and not move them at all, until you sent a monster around this area, which I guess you could call an aggro sort of range, you're aggroing his monsters basically. And for whatever reason, he wasn't actually playing trap cards in front of him. I have no idea if that's to do with the priority of what cards were in his hand. If he doesn't play cards in front of him, if he plays monsters out, I don't know to say it, but I tested his AI on this exact same map to try and confirm if it was the map's problem, because before what I did was actually have, I even tried a setup like this, and I was experiencing the same problem, just with all this stuff on the outside being Wasteland. So I thought maybe the problem was it's because there's Wasteland and he doesn't know how to really react to it, but when I made the map, like with all the metal and everything, he had the exact same problem. So I'm not entirely sure what was happening, honestly. Um, I didn't bother testing his a complete copy of his deck on this AI. Maybe I should have. Probably in the future I'll be doing that to get better duels out of this. But I was trying a bunch of different stuff. Like, what setups was I trying? I'll show you the original maps I wanted to use quickly before we get into the duels. Because I had some pretty creative ideas, so I was pretty disappointed that none of it worked. So I was, tinkering around with setups like this, and what happened was, he would move forward normally, but then he would have that same problem I described before, where he'd play a monster behind him, not move it, play a monster behind him, not move it, play a monster behind him. And I was thinking, what's going wrong? Is it to do with the map? And then, I tried doing stuff like moving these tiles to try and get him to move them around, and he still wasn't actually doing any of that. He still just wasn't playing properly. And I'll just keep tinkering around with a map like this and have all these cool map designs, or at least I think they're cool map designs, and he just still wasn't functioning normally. So that's when I said, screw it. I'll make the map originally what it was, and then he was still having the exact same problems. So it was at that point that I went to this map design and tried out the deck, and it gave me a better duel than I thought it ever was going to. So again, I've said this a couple times before, but in hindsight, I really do wish I made the deck a bit better. But the duels I got out of it I was happy with them, so I didn't want to ruin it. Because after all that effort and recording, I honestly spent a good hour or two on this duel. Maybe an hour and a half, realistically, total. Testing out different maps, going back and forth, using codes and stuff. And ultimately, I'm pretty happy with it, so, I just didn't want to, exit out and change things too drastically. I really, really, really should have, now that I think about it, but I was just having a lot of trouble with stuff, so I just kind of called it there. Either way, I hope you guys enjoy the duel. I also used a no music code, and decided to replace the music with something else, so you guys don't have to listen to the custom duel theme for the 25th consecutive time. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy the duel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.